Hello, welcome back to Planet 40k. We've got a returning series for you today, which is the Know Your Foe series, where we look into another one of the codexes within the 40k game, and we break down the actual codex itself to help with our own factions. Now, of course, this is a Necron channel. However, if you're not a Necron player, you'll still find this video very useful. There's going to be a lot of information in this video. It might be an hour long. I'm not sure how long this is going to go on for. It's going to be a lot of information. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. So there's going to be 7 chapters within this video that we're going to go through. We're going to go through the abilities, we're going to go through all the Hive Fleets and the options of Army of the Renown. We're going to go through some of the best Warlord Traits, some of the best Relics, Stratagems, some common units that you're likely going to be going up against if you're playing Tyranids, and then finally we're going to check out their secondary objective options within their chapter approved part of their codex. So let's begin with their abilities. So the first 2 abilities that I've displayed here, not really a lot that's new here. The Synapse ability for the monsters and Synapse creatures. Any Hive Fleet unit within 6 inches gets to automatically pass morale tests. Now, distinctive behaviour has now left the codex, which is a buff for the faction because now they don't need to target the nearest unit or charge the nearest unit without any penalties. Then the other common ability is Shadow in the Warp, which is another aura ability. While there's a Psychic within 18 inches, they get to subtract 1 from the Psychic tests. Then furthermore, each time they suffer perils of the warp, they're going to suffer an additional mortal wound. Now this isn't going to affect Necron players because we don't have Psychers, thankfully, but bear this one in mind if you're not playing your Necrons, other factions such as Space Marines that may have Psychers. Now one of the new abilities that have come to the codex is Swarming Masses. Now this is mainly for the troop options, so you've got the Hormagaunts, the Termagants as well as the Gargoyles. They're now a troop selection and they've all got the Swarming Masses ability within their datasheet. So as standard, they can obviously fight if they're within engagement range of enemy units, but furthermore with the Swarming Masses ability, they don't need to be within half an inch of a model that's within half an inch. They can actually fight up to 2.5 inches away of enemy models, which means you're going to get a lot more enemy units attacking our guys with those Swarming Masses. Now one of the big new abilities that is within this codex is the Synaptic Link. Now Synapse creatures will have a 12-inch Synaptic Link range, and it effectively allows Synapse units to pass on their Synapse abilities to other Synapse creatures, which will then buff units within their Synapse range. So we've got an example to show you within the image in case it's a little bit too complicated. So for example, the Broodlord. He's got the Vicious Insight ability, and any Hive Fleet core units that are within Synaptic Link range that make a melee attack with an unmodified wound roll of a 6 will get an extra added AP to the attack by 1. Now in the image here you can see that the Broodlord is obviously not within 12 inches of the Gene Stealers, which are circled in blue. However, they are in Synaptic Link range and I'll show you why. So the Hive Tyrant is also a Synapse creature that's within 12 inches of the Broodlord. So then the Broodlord has passed that Synaptic ability to the Hive Tyrant. And then furthermore, the Zoanthrope, which is another Synapse creature, is within Synaptic Link range of the Hive Tyrant. So now the ability has been passed on to the Zoanthrope. And then as you can see, the Gene Stealers are actually within 12 inches or Synaptic Link range of the Zoanthrope. So you're effectively passing on your ability through Synapse creatures. So there will be a chain of Synapse creatures within the battlefield. If you can break that chain, you're going to break the abilities being passed on from one side of the battle to the other. Okay, so moving on to the next ability, they got the Synaptic Imperative ability. Now this is kind of similar to our command protocols, but at the same time it isn't, because the command protocols are pretty bad. You got to pre-order them pre-game, unless you're playing the Zerakan Dynasty where you can then manipulate those command protocols. But the Tyranids, they can choose their Synaptic Imperative abilities every single battle round, and there's an ability for each and every Synapse unit within their codex. Now they can only use one of these per battle round, but of course when you're getting to select them, that's quite a powerful thing. Now I'm just going to display them on the screen for you. I'm not going to go through each and every one. We will go through some of these later on in this video when we go through some of the common units. But I'll give you one of the examples just to show the kind of power that comes from this ability. So if they're taking a Neurothrope, using the Psychic Augmentation ability, so any friendly Hive Tendril units that are within 6 inches of this Synapse model, they get to +1 to their Psychic test, they get to +1 to their Deny the Witch test, and then furthermore, each time a model loses a wound as a result of a mortal wound, on a 5+, the wound is not lost. So effectively free upgrades, not like our Cryptic Arcana where you got to pay for these kind of upgrades, they're free upgrades, and you get to select them each and every battle round. Now let's move on to the Psychic abilities. Catalyst has always been a firm favourite, that's the first one. Simply getting a 5+ Feel No Pain save, or Titanic units have to have a 6+ Feel No Pain save. The Horror, which is a malediction, isn't as useful as it used to be. It used to be a -1 to hit, now it just basically affects our leadership and combat attrition tests. Now Necrons are leadership 10, so it's not that bad. We only really fail morale when you're losing a lot of warriors in a 20-man warrior blob, I can't see many Tyranid players taking the horror up against Necrons. Now the third one is new to this codex, which is the Neuroparasite. Now they've got to be within synaptic link range. Now we already spoke about the link range earlier. It is a 12-inch range. However, it can be passed on to other synapse creatures, so it can affect you even if you're quite far away on the battlefield. And they roll a d6 for every model in the unit, and if any rolls exceed our model's toughnesses, then we're going to be suffering a mortal wound to a maximum of 6. So again, I'm going to use a 20-man warrior blob as an example. If they're rolling 20 dice against that warrior unit, any 5s and 6s are going to score mortal wounds, which is actually about 6 mortal wounds right there. So that one is going to be quite a potent one. Now the Zerakan Dynasty comes in clutch again with that 5+ shrug against mortal wounds, but other than that, we're going to take a lot of damage from this. The fourth one is Onslaught, another one from the old codex. They can advance and fire assault weapons without any penalties. They can also move and fire heavy weapons without penalties, and then furthermore, they can declare a charge after advancing as well. That one is also quite a common one. Tyranids in general are quite rapid, but giving them the advance roll and then the charge roll, that makes them extremely rapid. The fifth one is Paroxysm. We can't fire Overwatch or Set to Defend, that's not that great. Then furthermore, enemy units that are making a melee attack must subtract 1 from the attacker's wound rolls. So that's actually pretty big. If it was a hit roll, that's not too bad, but the wound roll can be quite crucial. Even our War Scythes that are normally Strength 7 going up against a standard Toughness 4 kind of model is still going to need force to wound. Then the final one is Psychic Scream. This affects the closest enemy unit within 18 inches and they suffer d3 mortal wounds. And effectively it's like another smite attack, without that -1 to the cast if they've used multiple smites within that psychic phase. So that's the psychic abilities to look out for. Let's move on to the Hive Fleets. So there are 7 Hive Fleets, and then of course there's the customized Hive Fleet as well on top of that. Then there's another option which is the Crusher Stampede, which we'll go over afterwards. So the first one is the Behemoth Hive Fleet. If they make a charge move against your guys, it's going to be a +1 to their strength. Then their adaptive is basically they can re-roll their charge rolls army wide. So they've got 2 abilities per Hive Fleet. One is the actual Hive Fleet ability, the second one is the adaptive. Now it's quite important to note, now with the adaptive part of the Hive Fleet abilities, these can be changed out for other abilities. We're going to go over that in a bit as well, but just bear that in mind, even the generic 7 Hive Fleets are customizable. So the second Hive Fleet here is the quickest one, which is the Kraken Hive Fleet. So when they make a charge move, you improve the AP by 1, that's okay I guess. And their adaptive ability, instead of rolling for an advance roll, they get d3+3 as an advance roll, which is basically an average of 5 to the move characteristic of the model. But these guys are the quickest ones as mentioned. Now the next one is the Leviathan Hive Fleet. This one is the most commonly used one at the moment. I'd say it's probably the most overpowered, and here's why. So first of all, if you make an attack against a synapse creature, then any unmodified wound rolls of a 1, 2 or 3 will always fail, irrespective of any abilities that the weapon or the attacker may have. It's effectively like a transhuman physiology for the Tyranids there, with the synapse keywords. Now furthermore, each time you make an attack against a unit that isn't a synapse creature, but they're within the synaptic link range, then any unmodified wound rolls of a 1 or a 2 will always fail, irrespective of any abilities that the weapon or the attacker may have. So it's like a mini transhuman physiology this time. So for example, if they're toughness 3 and your strength 6, normally you would wound on a 2+, but not in this case, it will be a 3+, because a 1 and a 2 will always fail. So think about it, when you've got this army wide, that can be absolutely massive. Especially on those big synapse creatures, the big synapse monsters. No matter what, you need a 4+ to wound them. Bit like our quantum shielding I guess, but they've got it pretty much army wide. Their adaptive ability, when they're selected to shoot or fight, they get to re-roll a single hit roll when resolving the unit's attacks. Not too bad. On to the next one, which is the Gorgon Hive Fleets. These guys are the poisonous guys. If they make an attack against our guys, as long as we're not vehicles, then any unmodified wound rolls of a 4+ will always be successful. So even if they're strength 3 and they're going up against say toughness 5, toughness 6, it does not matter, they only need a 4+ to wound us. So their strength massively gets buffed up, and what you've got to remember here, this only excludes vehicle and titanic models, it does not exclude monsters. So even the little gribblies can go right up against say the Nightbringer with a toughness value of a 7 and still only need a 4+ to wound, which kind of effectively makes the little bugs strength 7 at that moment in time. Now their adaptive ability, very similar to the previous one, when they're selected to shoot or fight, they get to re-roll a single wound roll when making their attacks. On to the next one, which is the Jorgenmunder Hive Fleet. Bit of a mouthful to say that one. Now I used to play Tyranids in the 8th edition, and this was the Hive Fleet that I used to select. These guys are the sneaky guys that like to use the tunnels. So their abilities, each time a ranged attack targets a monster, if the attacker is more than 18 inches away, then they get the benefits of dense cover against the attack. And then furthermore, each time a ranged attack is made against the non-monster units, if you're more than 12 inches away, they then get dense cover. So if you're not aware of what dense cover actually is, it's just simply a -1 to hit them. Normally this terrain trait is with trees and things like that, but these guys are getting it army wide. Then further to boost this with the adaptive ability, if you're using a blast weapon, so if you're using the Doomsday Arcs or your Doomstalker as an example, you have to half the amount of models that are within the unit, rounding upwards, to determine how many attacks are made with the weapon. So as if the blast units within our codex weren't already bad enough, they get much worse when firing against the Jungminder Hive Fleet. Next we've got the Kronos Hive Fleet. These are the shooty guys, a bit like our Mephrit dynasty. They get to add 4 inches to their range characteristics of the weapons that they're equipped with, and there's no restriction on pistols, and it's not 3 inches, it's 4 inches, so they're already better than the Mephrit dynasty in my opinion. Then furthermore, each time you make a ranged attack that targets a unit within half range, you improve the AP by 1. Again, very similar to the Mephrit dynasty there. On to the final one, which is the Hydra Hive Fleet. This is the swarmy kind of Hive Fleet. When they make melee attacks that target a unit containing fewer models in their own, you add 1 to the attack's hits rolls. And then for the purpose of the adaptation, vehicles and monsters will count as 5. So with our smaller units such as our Scorpet Destroyers, our Ophidian Destroyers, even our Locust Heavy Destroyers, units like that have got 3 or 6 models within the unit, they're easily going to be outnumbered. If you're going up against the Hydra Hive Fleet that has swarming masses, you're going to come up against a lot of Hermagants, maybe Gargoyles. They're playing the Horde type list and they're going to get a +1 to their hit rolls. Then their adaptive is simply a +1 to their move characteristics of the models, and they can also consolidate an additional 3 inches, which is actually quite interesting if you're going up against Hormagaunts in particular, because they've also got the ability which is Bounding Leap, which is an additional 3 inches to their pile-in. So that's the 7 generic Hive Fleets. Now I did mention at the start of discussing these 7, you can customize the actual adaptations. And the worst thing about it is for us, is they get to choose this at the start of the battles. So it's not pre-game when they're creating a list, they get to see your list, they get to see what you got on the tabletop, they even get to deploy, so it's after determining who gets the first turn, then they get to sort out the adaptive part of their Hive Fleet abilities. Now here are the 3 lists that they get access to. Now pretty much every Hive Fleet only has access to 2 out of 3 of these lists. However, you can see from some of these examples here, they can be quite powerful. So I'll give you a few examples here. From the Lurk Biomorphologies list, you've got the Territorial Instincts. So monster units will gain objectives secured. And then furthermore, monsters with a wounds characteristics of 10 or more will count as 5 models when determining control of an objective, which is pretty decent. Or another example from the Hunt Biomorphologies, Ambush Predators. Units with this adaptation are eligible to perform heroic interventions as if they were a character model. Now think about that, that's army wide throughout the entire Hive Fleet. They're going to be able to heroically intervene if they wanted to. Then the last example I wanted to show you from the Feed Biomorphologies list, which is the Ecoskeleton Stabilization ability. So models with this adaptation do not suffer penalties to the hits roll when firing assault weapons at the same turn as they advanced. They can also move and fire heavy weapons, and then monsters also with this adaptation do not suffer the penalty incurred to their hit rolls when firing heavy weapons within engagement range. So they get to basically select one of their 7 generic Hive Fleets, they get to then customize it to the way they see fit, then they still get access to their Stratagem psychic abilities, Warlord Traits and Relics that are specific to those Hive Fleets as well. Because of course with the Necron Codex, when you go custom with the custom dynasty, you instantly lose access to the dynasty specific Stratagems, Warlord Traits and Relics. Now the last option that does come up, which is Army of Renown, which is called Crusher Stampede. Now there are some restrictions when they take the Crusher Stampede. The first one is they cannot include any swarm units, and they cannot contain any models with the wound characteristics of 2 or less. So no little gribblies here, it's all monsters and maybe Tyranid warriors, things that aren't just 1 wound. And furthermore, for each unit that does not have the monster keyword, they must include at least 1 monster. So this pretty much tells you what it is right here. It's going to be quite monster heavy within these lists. Now the benefits of taking the Crusher Stampede are as follows. So instantly everybody in that list gets the Crusher Stampede keyword. Then units that do not have the monster keyword will be gaining the Shielded by the Hive Mind ability. So we'll quickly go over to the Shielded by the Hive Mind ability. So they can't gain the Hive Fleet adaptation, but they get a 5+ in-1 save. Very nice. Going back to the benefits, monster units will be gaining the Hulking Behemoth's ability. So it's the exact same as the Shielded from the Hive Mind ability. It's a 5+ in-1 save, but it's even better than that. Now it's a -1 to all damage taken. Then furthermore, they got another one. Models in this unit count as the number of models equal to their remaining wounds for the purposes of determining control of objective markers. So you can simply have a monster that's on 10 wounds remaining. So for the purpose of controlling objective markers, they're going to be considered to have 10 models within range of the objective. So if we've only got 9 models that are within range of an objective that isn't OBSEC, then we will not be contesting the objective, they will actually have it. The Crusher Stampede also has their own Warlord traits. They've also got their own psychic abilities, their own relics and stratagems as well. We don't want to go through all of those. They're kind of basic stuff. Nothing really stands out, but they are quite badass because a 5+ invuln army wide, as you know, is pretty good. Okay, so next we're on to the Warlord traits. And for me, every single one of these Warlord traits is actually pretty good. I'm kind of jealous if I'm honest. Just take the first one, Alien Cunning. The Warlord gets objective secured. The Warlord counts as 5 models when determining control of the objective marker, so you got OBSEC with 5 models, and then the Warlord can start to perform an action even if it advanced or fell back. Pretty good. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but there's 6 here. Every single one of them is very good, whereas with the Necron Codex, we've got 1 or 2 decent options. They're not amazing, but they're okay. Like Enduring Will for that -1 to damage, for example, but all 6 of these are pretty decent, especially with a very customizable codex. So if you want to pause it to take a look at these, by all means give it a little pause and read through them. But as for the video, we're going to move on to the relics. I wanted to mention some of the relics that I wanted you to kind of look out for really, because some of them are pretty cool, some of them are pretty overpowered. The first one is Gestation Sac, which is a relic that requires you to do an action, so at the start of the shooting phase, the model can perform this action, and the action will be completed at the end of that phase. So when it is completed, you simply set up a new Ripper Swarm unit within the battlefield, within 3 inches of this model and not within engagement range of any enemy units, and the Ripper Swarms unit contains D3+1 models. So you'll be getting an average of 3 Ripper Swarms every time you do this action. And then what makes this even more brilliant is the fact that this does not cost you any reinforcement points whatsoever. This is free to do, and the character doing this can be doing this every single battle round. So if the character did this for 5 battle rounds in a row, on average you can be bringing 15 Ripper Swarms throughout the game, with the potential of actually bringing 20 if you roll really high. Now Ripper Swarms are very similar to our Scarab Swarms. Now they're not as quick, they're only moving 6 inches, but they've got a lot of wounds with 4 wounds, they've got a lot of attacks with 4 attacks, and they're just an annoying little screen unit, which is going to also add to the Lookout Sir ability of that character holding that relic too. Next one I thought that's worth a mention, which is the Resonance Barb. So for Psychic models only, they can add 1 to their Psychic test for the bearers, and then furthermore the bearer will know an additional Psychic power from the Hive Mind discipline. Now this is a very Psychic heavy faction. They're very strong with their smites in particular, so giving them additional Psychic abilities is not a good thing for us. Another one worth a mention, which is the Seer Hive. For Toxin Sac models only, each time the bearer makes a melee attack against a unit, excluding our monsters and vehicles, then if a hit is scored, it automatically wounds. So really good on the big monsters. So quite a lot of their codex has options to take the Toxin Sac's war gear, but auto wounding with all the dice. That isn't just 6s, that's every single hit that is scored is going to be auto wounding. I think that's pretty decent, especially with those high damage melee weapons. Next one is the Shard Gullet. So this will be replacing the Heavy Venom Cannon, and the Heavy Venom Cannon is actually already pretty decent as it is with a damage 4 weapon. This is a 36-inch weapon, assault 3, its strength is 12, -5 AP, and the damage is 5. Kinda reminds me of our Tachyon Arrow. They're also strength 12, -5 AP, and the damage is only D6 for us. These guys get a straight 5 as the damage, and they get to use it every single shooting phase, not just once per battle. The Yomgal Factor. Another option which is pretty decent, start the fight phase, you select one of the following. So either at the end of the fight phase you add 2 to the bearer's strength, you can add 1 to the bearer's attacks, or add 1 to the bearer's toughness. Now this one can catch you out, in particular that +2 to the strength. This could be the difference between wounding on 3s and wounding on 2s, so it can catch you out if you're not aware of it. Then the final relic I wanted to mention is the Dirge Heart of Karis. Each time the bearer is selected to fight, after resolving the attacks, select one enemy unit, hit by an attack made by the bearer this phase, and then until the end of the next turn, that unit will be losing objectives secured, and then it'll be a -1 to their leadership. I'm not too bothered about the leadership part, but losing objectives secured again can catch you out, especially with all the shenanigans we've already mentioned in this video already, where monsters could potentially be using the amount of wounds to determine who actually controls an objective, so you can quite easily lose an objective that you think you've held really well with, say, 20 warriors, objective secured. You can quite easily lose this by simply going up against one Tyranid monster that's got this relic. Okay, so we're getting there. Next we're going to talk about the stratagems of note. There's quite a lot that caught my eye. There's probably more that probably should have made this video, but this video will probably be an hour long if I did everything. I may as well just do a whole codex review at that point, so I've just picked out a few here that I wanted to mention today. So the first one being rapid regeneration for 1 command point, and they simply get to regenerate D3 lost wounds. Pretty decent, especially on those units that have got a bracket table within the datasheets. Endless Swarm for 1 command point. This one actually grinds my gears a little bit because they basically do Necrons better than Necrons do Necrons. So at the start of the command phase, you select an endless multitude unit from the army, and up to D3 plus 3 destroyed models can be added back to the unit with their full wounds remaining. So the endless multitude units are all the troop units, so it's the Gargoyles, the Hormagaunts and the Termagants. You can be bringing back an average of 5, potentially even 6, with just 1 command point every single time. That one annoys me slightly. I wish we had that kind of stratagem. Enfolding Strike for a command point used with the Parasite of Mortrex in the movement phase when they finish a normal move or advanced move by passing over an enemy unit. Roll a d6, a 2, 3, 4 or a 5 will make us suffer d3 mortal wounds, and then we're infected with parasites. I'll go over that part in a second, but on a 6 we're going to be suffering 3 mortal wounds and then affected with parasites. So what are the parasites? Parasites are an infection. At the start of our command phase, so we are the opponents of course, the following happens. So you roll a d6, on a 1, 2 or a 3 our unit suffers d3 more mortal wounds, but we're then no longer affected by the parasites. On a 4, 5 or a 6 we still suffer d3 mortal wounds and we remain infected with the parasites. So this could go on and on and on if you roll pretty badly, and these things can literally just be flying over all of our units and then pretty much infecting all of our units, causing d3 wounds in our own command phase. And it's at the start of our command phase, which is actually pretty key because that's before all the abilities and whatnot actually happen. So if we lost our Overlord at the start of the command phase due to these parasites, then he's not going to be putting the Marble Be Done ability on the units because he's effectively dead. But it gets even worse than that, and just bear in mind this is only 1 command point as well. But if that unit suffers 2 or more mortal wounds as a result of this ability this phase, set up a new friendly Hive Fleet Ripper Swarm unit on the battlefield within 3 inches of that unit and not within engagement range of an enemy unit. And the Ripper Swarm is only going to be 1 model for the unit, and again it's not going to cost them any reinforcement points. So they're getting more units for free with the Ripper Swarms, and it gets even worse. So there's a little ability at the bottom there called It Itches. So while a unit is infected with parasites, we lose objective secured. All of that for 1 command point. Brilliant. Now to be fair, the Parasite of the Mortrex does actually have this ability inbuilt within its datasheet, but this is just if it passes over during the movement phase. But what's hilarious is the fact that this is an 80 point model. 80 points to be able to do that, and then 1 command point to be able to do it in the movement phase as well. That's going to be an absolute nightmare if you're going up against it. Let's check out some of the tunneling monsters. So Subterranean Assault for 1 command point, using the reinforcement step of the movement phase, a Trigon or a Trigon Prime. That's set up from the Death from Below ability, which is effectively their version of Deep Strike. They can then select a friendly Hive Fleet unit within the troops battlefield role that's in strategic reserves, and then set them up anywhere on the battlefield that is wholly within 9 inches of the Trigon or Trigon Prime model, and not within 9 inches of enemy models. So it effectively gives the Deep Strike ability to a troop selection within their strategic reserves. Now we do have that kind of stuff with our Night Scythe and our Monolith, but neither of those are that great. Once they've done their job, they're kind of redundant. I mean, the Monolith does do something, I guess, but it's really expensive. Whereas a Trigon and a Trigon Prime are pretty vicious in combat. They've got a decent shooting capabilities, so they're going to be quite dangerous throughout the rest of the battle. Okay, so what else we got? We've got the Power of the Hive Mind. This one's a very simple one. For psychic characters, they get to manifest an additional psychic power for a command point. Already we know that one's quite powerful. Indomitable Monstrosity for a command point. Any Hive Tendril monsters that are selected as a target of an attack, they basically get transhuman physiology if they don't already, so any unmodified wound rolls of 1, 2 or 3 will always fail. So if they're not selected the Leviathan Hive Fleet, where they would naturally have this, so maybe they've selected the Kraken Hive Fleet, there is still a way of giving them transhuman physiology. Then the final one worth a note here is Reinforced Hive Node. Now this one is 1 or 2 command points depending on how many models in the unit. This is for your Tyranid warriors and the Tyranid Prime. When they're selected as a target of an attack, it's simply just a -1 to the damage. Pretty nice. It can sometimes catch you out, especially when on average you think you may have got rid of the unit, and then they pull this one on you and you've actually not cleared the unit at all. Bearing in mind that these guys have synapse, so they've got the synaptic link, and the Tyranid warriors are also objective secured as well, so this one can really catch you out if you're not careful. Okay, on to the next chapter. I did warn you it's going to be quite an informative video. We're going to be moving on to the common units that you're likely to be coming up against if you're playing the Tyranid faction. Now, Gene Stealers aren't really a thing anymore. In the previous edition, everybody was playing Gene Stealers with their Broodlord. They were able to advance and charge. With Kraken, they were advancing 3d6, picking the highest. so they were pretty rapid. Then they had stratagems as well to get in your face turn 1. That isn't really a thing anymore, their datasheet has changed. However, there are some units that you're pretty much going to see in every single list, starting off with the Neurothrope. Now these things are cheap as chips, 100 points for a HQ. It's got a 3+ invuln save. Very rare for 9th edition to give a unit a 3+ invulnerable save. It also gets a +1 to the psychic tests, and units within 6 inches can cast on 3d6, discarding the lowest dice. So they're pretty much always likely to succeed with their psychic power casting. They get to then heal other Neurothropes as well as Zoanthropes that are within 12 inches, and they've got a Synaptic Imperative, which we did mention at the ability section of this video. And their one is a +1 to the psychic test, deny test, and also a 5+ feel no pain save against mortal wounds for units within 6 inches. All of that for only 100 points. Now bear in mind this thing's going to be smiting you to death along with lots of other units that have got psychic abilities, but because of the fact that it's so cheap, you're going to see this one almost every time. Now as for the bigger stuff, the Hive Tyrant and the Winged Hive Tyrant are quite a common selection for Tyranid players. They're the best generic options because you can put any relic, any Warlord trait on these two units. Now of course the Winged Tyrant is simply just giving them wings, so they're going to have that fly keyword, and instead of having a 9-inch movement they're going to have a 16-inch movement, so they're going to be pretty rapid. But these units are pretty much a build your own HQ monster. Now even though both of them have got more than 9 wounds, they get to use the Lookout Sir ability if they're taken with Tyrant Guard. More useful of course to the Hive Tyrant that's on foot, because Tyrant Guard don't have wings, but that's another thing that could catch you out, because normally when you're firing against a character that's got 10 wounds or more, it doesn't have Lookout Sir, but in this case it can. Now these things are going to be buffing core units with rerolls to their 1s to hit rolls, and it also has a 4+ invuln save as standard. Most generic generals of a codex have a 4+ invuln save just like our Overlord does. Now as mentioned, both of these are pretty quick. Then finally the Synaptic Imperative ability, units within 6 inches can fall back and recharge. So very similar feel to our Canoptic Wraiths there. Almost ensures that they're going to be fighting first. Another big one this edition, which did have a few nerfs in a recent FAQ update, but it's still an absolute powerhouse. It's toughness 8, 15 wounds, it's got its 4+ invuln save. Its psychic overload ability is absolutely outrageous, so any psychic abilities that have been cast with a psychic test of 7 or more, it will pretty much throw out additional mortal wounds to the closest enemy model within 12 inches. So it can be between 1 and 3 mortal wounds depending on how many wounds the Maleceptor actually has remaining. It's got options of using the adaptive physiology upgrades as well, so that's all the monster upgrades, so you can stick a -1 to damage for example. If the monster didn't have an invuln save, you can stick an invuln save, so there's lots of options within that adaptive physiology upgrade section, but this Maleceptor has got the option of any of them. Then their Synaptic Imperative, units within 6 inches can do the following, so perform actions and still fire, they can advance from fall back and still do an action, and they can do psychic actions and it won't prevent them from doing other psychic abilities when they're casting. But of course this model is an actual psyker himself, so he's going to be doing lots of smite attacks again, maybe putting Catalyst save for that 5+ feel no pain save. There's lots of little ways and combos that can make this thing an absolute terror. Speaking of psychic terrors, we've got the Zoanthropes, another common one. All of them have got a 4+ invuln save. They've got the Warp Blast ability, so whenever they're manifesting Smite or a Witchfire psychic power, they get to add 1 to that psychic test, and then furthermore they get to add 1 to the amount of mortal wounds suffered by the enemy unit for each model within this unit to a maximum of 3. So Zoanthrope units can actually have units from between 3 and 6 models. So if they've got 6 models, they're going to be adding 6 to the psychic tests, and then a maximum of 3 mortal wounds on top of the actual smite attack. So if they roll high for the actual smite, which they likely would if they're +6 to the psychic test, they're likely going to do a super smite, which is d6. They could roll really high with that and roll a 6, and then they're going to be adding 3 more on top of that, which could be 9 mortal wounds from a single smite attack. Furthermore, they don't take up any slots if you're taking a Neurothrope, which they pretty much will be. I think every single list I've seen that's been within the tournament has taken a Neurothrope, so these guys aren't going to take up a slot. And their Synaptic Imperative, units within 6 inches, give monster models a 4+ invuln save, and non-monster models get a 5+ invuln save. Fantastic. Tyranid Warriors, they're now the go-to option within the troop selections since Genestealers left and went into the elite selections. So these are troops with objectives secured, and they've got Synapse, which is quite important. That's going to keep their Synaptic link range intact if they've kept these guys alive. They're toughness 5 and 3 wounds per model, and they've got a good combination of both range and melee attack. You can actually customize them to be completely ranged or completely melee, or a bit of both, just depends on how they want to play really. And their Synaptic Imperative, units within 6 inches that make a melee attack, any unmodified hit rolls of a 6 will score an additional hit. Quite nice. Gargoyles, this is another new one that's hit the troop selections that used to be a fast attack. So these are troops, but they move 12 inches and they can fly. I mean, we can't even get flayed ones into the troop selections, let alone units that have got 12 inches and fly on top of that. They're only 8 points per model, so they're dirt cheap. Now they are quite squishy, but they can be taken in units of up to 20 of them. They're going to have that swarming masses ability, so they're going to be able to fight within 2.5 inches. And then furthermore, every single model carries a strength 5 minus 1 AP flesh borer ranged weapon. Now thankfully these aren't a Synapse unit, but they probably don't need to be, they're that cheap. These guys are going to be scoring a lot of primary points and stealing a lot of primary points as well. And then furthermore with the secondary objectives on top of that, which we're going to go over that later in this video, this is the unit that's going to be scoring them a lot of points. Then the last one of note here, which is actually a flyer. When someone first told me about this, I completely disregarded it. I thought there's no way in 9th edition there's going to be a flyer that's going to be that potent, until I looked at the datasheet. So they've got a lot of range options that are very strong. So they're either taking 2 heavy venom cannons, which are going to be a total of 6 shots at strength 9, minus 3 AP and 4 damage. Or they're going to be taking 2 Stranglethorn cannons, which are 36 inch range, heavy D3 plus 3, so an average of 5 per weapon. So that's going to be an average of 10, because you've got 2 of them. These are strength 8, minus 2 AP and 2 damage with the blast ability. So you get either of those options. And then furthermore, they get the Stinger Salvos, 24 inches, assault 8, strength 5, minus 1 AP and 1 damage. So they are an anti-tank, but they're also an anti-infantry as well. Even in combat, they're pretty good, strength 6, minus 2 AP and 2 damage. But there's more to them than that. That's just their range and melee capabilities. They've also got a bombing attack with their spore mines. So when they move across an enemy unit, they simply get to roll 6d6 if it's a vehicle or monster, and a single d6 for each other model in a unit, to a maximum of 10d6. And for each 4+ roll, the unit suffers a mortal wound. Now if they didn't move across any units, instead they get to spawn out spore mines, which will be a unit of 3 of them on the battlefield, and it's not going to cost them any reinforcement points. So now the question is, what are spore mines? Now these are annoying little creatures. They've not got any weapons whatsoever. They've got a 6+ armor save. However, they're pretty much ticking time bombs. When they get within 3 inches, they're going to be throwing out mortal wounds. And that's per single spore mine, when 3 of these could be actually spawned every single turn if they wanted to. Furthermore, they've got the hard to hit ability because it's a flyer, and it's even got the option to go into hover mode if needed, because of course the movement is restricted to a 90-degree pivot if they did stay in that flying mode. But if they go into hover mode, that completely gets removed, but then the hard to hit ability will also be removed. Then they've got the options of using the adaptive physiology upgrades as mentioned earlier, so it could be potentially an in-1 save, a -1 to damage, all that kind of stuff. So as flyers go, it's a pretty tough flyer and it's got a lot of damage output. Okay, so that's the common units all dealt with. If you're going up against Tyranids, you're very likely to see most of those units within a list. Hopefully that will help you somewhat. The last chapter within this video is going to be the secondary objectives. Now there's 3 secondary objectives within the actual Tyranid Codex that we're going to go through now. The first one being the Synaptic Insight, which is a no mercy, no respite option. So it's effectively a kill tally for Synapse models. So if a Synapse model kills your units, they're going to be keeping track of how many models have been killed. Now, this does not affect models that have got wounds with 2 or less. So if the model's got between 3 and 5 wounds, that's going to add 1 to their kill tally. Between 6 and 9 wounds, it will add 2 to their kill tally. And 10 or more, it's going to add 3 to their kill tally. And they're going to be scoring 3 victory points at the end of each battle round if their kill tally is 4 or more. But they can't be scoring more than 12 victory points for this objective. Now against some factions, this one is probably going to be really good. Against us, it depends on our list really. If we're going up against Necrons, of course you've got the Scorpion Destroyers, you've got the Canoptic Scarabs, Canoptic Wraiths, Ophidian Destroyers, Locust Heavy Destroyers. It's not going to really come into play against Immortals, Warriors, anything that's got 1 wound, so Flayed ones as well. If you've got a Warrior heavy list, this one is going to be a bad choice for the Tyranid player. However, if you've gone Destroyer heavy, this one could potentially be quite a decent option for them because it's done on every single model. So if you lost a unit of 6 Scorpion Destroyers, that's going to be 6 Synaptic kill points, and instantly they're going to be scoring 3 points for that battle round. So this one depends on our list. Now the second one, which is Cranial Feasting, which is a purge the enemy option. Now each time a character model or unit champion is destroyed by a melee attack, roll a d6, add in 2 if they've got the feeder tendrils, which most of them don't have the feeder tendrils. That's the venom thropes and things like that. And also you're going to be adding 2 if it's got the character keyword. On a 6+, they gain a command point to a maximum of 1 command point per round. So if they killed our Overlord, for example, that would be a +2 to their roll, so they've simply got to roll a 4+ in order to gain a command point. Now, at the end of the battle, if you will be scoring 3 victory points if you gained 1 or more command points during the battle due to this objective. They can potentially do that one, not a problem. Then score 1 victory point for each character model that was destroyed by a melee attack. So they've already killed the Overlord, so that would be 4 points now, and then any further characters within the game that they've slaughtered. Then furthermore, they're going to be scoring 3 victory points if the enemy Warlord was destroyed in melee. So this secondary objective is actually quite comparable to Assassination. However, with Assassination, if the opposing player's got, say for example, 3 characters, you can only get a max score of 10 victory points for Assassination because it's 3 per character, then 1 extra for the actual Warlord. Whereas with this secondary objective, even if we've only got 1 Overlord model and that's the only character within our list, they could potentially score 3 victory points for gaining that command point back for killing that character. They then get an additional 1 for killing the character, making 4, and then they're going to get 3 more because he's the Warlord. That will put them on 7, but that's just 1 single character model. If you've got more character models, you're going to be losing 1 point per character model. I don't rate this one too highly, but in a smaller game, this one's actually not too bad. But there's probably better options within the secondaries that they can take. The third one is Spore Nodes, which is a Shadow Operations option. Score 4 victory points each time an enemy unit successfully completes the following action. So 1 troops unit from the army gets to perform the action at the end of the movement phase. From the second battle round onwards, if it's within 6 inches of the opponent's deployment zone and not within 6 inches of any other Spore Node objective marker. So the action will be complete on their turn, and then they put a Spore marker within 1 inches of the unit that's just done the action. Now this one I think is going to be really easy for them because Gargoyles, as mentioned, are troop selection, so they can be doing this. They've got that 12-inch movement, so they're going to be getting there pretty quickly. And it happens in the second battle round anyway, so the first battle round they don't actually need to be there. They don't want to get there in the first battle round, if I'm honest. But if they've got multiple Gargoyle units, they can be getting this one done and quite easily max out the 15 points with this secondary objective. So guys, that's it for today's video. If you stuck around to the end of the video, thank you very much. Remember to subscribe and like and all that good stuff. I hope the video does help you somewhat when you're going up against the Tyranid faction. Now, it's not an easy thing to go against that faction. Most of the time you will lose because by turn 4 you're probably going to get tabled. They're very powerful at the moment, but I hope this does help you. So guys, all that's left to say, thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time.